In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, God is one. Amen. Well, good morning. I don't know who's there. I can see apparently there are two people here, but I think they might both be me. Well, it's December, and it's the 18th of December, so we're heading towards the darkest and most miserable time of the year. Thank goodness we have Christmas in the middle of it, which can cheer it up. And it is still dark and miserable out there, even though it's exactly 10 o'clock now. It probably won't really get fully light all day long today. And certainly quite heavy clouds and quite a lot of, it just looks miserable and horrid out. With grey sky and thick clouds and so on. And it's spitting with rain earlier on. But on the outside of the church, we've got lots of lights up, which are all twinkling away and so on. They go around the windows, which the chap who runs the petrol station opposite say, "Why are you advertising McDonald's?" Because it actually looks like that, McDonald's M, as you go over. There we go. So that's a way of cheering the place up. And indeed, last week, not the mayor, the mayor's assistant, the mayor of Lincoln's assistant, recognized the church by the fact that we had lights outside rather than anything else. So it's worthwhile doing. And it's nice to do. It does look cheery. It does brighten up this corner. Otherwise, it'd be rather dull. The other thing that's quite cheery and amusing is that on Sunday, I found that I had a paper bag on my desk. And here's the paper bag. And it has something written on it. And it says, "In remembrance of St. Bugalags, 10 at 10. What could that be? So I opened it up, and what did I find? But this. It's it's obviously a what do you call it? A mat for putting a cup on, and it says Bugalags, pronounced Bugalags. Noun 1, friendly nickname. Use this word to speak to someone or refer to them in a slightly insulting but affectionate way. Ask Bugalags if he wants a brew." But I ain't going to tell you what it comes from in British slang, because that is certainly rather rude. Anyway, so this was Mary and Stephen gave me this. So thank you very much to those two. I think Mary actually found it somewhere. I think it's rather funny. There we go. Friendly nickname from the British slang. I'm going to say what it is, but it's pretty obvious. You can work it out for yourselves. Though somehow or other, it hadn't actually occurred to me that that's what it came from. Dear, beyond naive. Never mind. What else was I going to say? There must have been something else. Oh, we've got Eleni busy polishing away brass. She didn't tell me she was coming, otherwise I'd have set it all out for her. That's probably why she didn't tell me. And we've got Tom arriving before very long, who's going to be helping to sort out the library. Then we have the ladies who come and play, what's that game? Scrabble this afternoon. And then there are various people wanting to come. I think we've got confessions at 11 o'clock. We've got more confessions sometime around about Vespers at 6 o'clock, followed by supper. And then there are, good morning, Nicoletta. I guess I'll see you later. And there are people wanting to come after Vespers, but I said to them, if they want to come after Vespers, they can wait until I've eaten. So they ought to come before Vespers. Otherwise, I just never stop today. I'll be completely like chewed string. Anyway, on that note, being about chewed string and falling asleep and not being able to continue, we're going to read Acts chapter 20, verses 7 to 11. I can see there are people turning up all over the place now. A sudden rush of folk. So Miss Connie, good evening. And Bev, good morning. And Cat's World, good afternoon. And Frank, good morning. I see you there, Frank. I was up in the Brig area the other day. Didn't have time to come and see you, though, because I had to get back home. Penelope, good morning. And Simon also. And Nicoletta, inshallah, see you later on. St. Bugalags, Bev, yes. Good. I'm glad it's amused you, Simon. Cat's World says, thank you, Father. It's a blessing for me to join. Hi, everyone. Well, Hopefully it's going to be a blessing to you, Cat's World. We shall soon see. If you like this, please click on, I guess it'll be somewhere up there for you. There should be a thumbs up, or it might be down there somewhere, a little thumbs up sign that you can click on, and that helps other people find it. Verse 7 of chapter 20 through 11. Now on the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul, ready to depart the next day, he's already packed his toothbrush, spoke to them and continued his message until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where they were gathered together, and in a window sat a certain young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep. He was overcome by sleep, and as Paul continued speaking, he fell down from the third story and was taken up dead. But Paul went down, fell on him, and embracing him said, "Do not trouble yourselves, for his life is in him." Now when he had come up, had broken bread and eaten and talked a long while, even until daybreak, he departed. And they brought the young man in alive, and they were not a little comforted. It's quite obvious then, isn't it, that that last verse should have come before the one before. It makes more sense if you read it that way around. So, whereabouts are they? They're in Troas, Alexandrian Troas, it was called. If you want to know where it is, you know the way that Turkey, let's draw it around this way. So you've got the Black Sea coming around like that, and you've got Turkey coming around with Myra, and up this little area here, you've got Istanbul, Constantinople. Well, Troas was up here. It's where Troy was, in that sort of area. Alexandrian Troas is now just a ruin, and the harbour is full of sand, so it's no longer used. He had been there before in Acts chapter 16, so presumably last time he was there, he made some converts, and now he's gone to this upper room, biggish place, in order to talk with them. First day of the week, that means it was Sunday. And that itself is interesting. So within 30 years or so of the resurrection, the Christian Sabbath had moved from Saturday to Sunday. Next, it's interesting that it's in the evening. So the Divine Liturgy, the Lord's Supper, evening meal, was still being served, celebrated in the evening rather than, as we now do, in the morning. Ceremonial, of course, we often do serve it in the evening, because usually you would have the 9th hour before you started the Divine Liturgy. So you do Matins, all the hours, 9th hour, then you do the Divine Liturgy. And then afterwards they do Vespers in the evening. So ceremonially it's still in the evening. But actually, of course, we do it usually during the morning. Earlier the better, so that people can fast. And what are they doing? They are breaking of bread. So very obviously, they're serving the Divine Liturgy. So you've got all of those things together. It's Sunday, it's in the evening, and they are serving the Divine Liturgy. They're breaking bread together. They are doing the Eucharistic service. And St. Paul, if you look in his other writings, will tell you really what the content of that was. St. Paul says, "As I received, so I hand on to you, that on the night the Lord was betrayed, he took bread," and so on. And you can go and read that there, a nice little Eucharistic prayer, as we'd say now, part of the anaphora, Thanksgiving prayer. It even says they came together. The Greek actually means gather together. The English word for that, of course, is congregate. So they congregated. This is a congregation. We have an early example of a congregation of Christians meeting together to serve the Divine Liturgy. And that is precisely what they have done. And that is in itself an interesting example about the way that the early church met. They're meeting in an upper room. whether they're meeting in an upper room in order to signify the Divine Liturgy, or whether they're meeting in an upper room because there happened to be a convenient space, we know not. But we have all the pieces there of the early liturgy, and we can see how that worked. So that is a rather wonderful thing. It is, of course, spring. It's probably a warm day, given that part of the world, and it has fallen into night and have lit all of the lights. And St. Paul, who is going to leave the next day, Monday morning, early, he's going to walk off to the port, and then he's going to another port, actually, and then he's going to be collected, and they're going to sail off towards Jerusalem. So that is the basic idea. And Paul, probably knowing that it's unlikely that he'll be coming back here, at least for some time, decides to, in the words of St. Luke, a little bit rudely, prolong his sermon. Okay? And you do get this sort of feeling, actually, in the Greek. He didn't just talk, he prolonged his sermon. How many clergy have done that in the past? And people fall asleep. Well, even last Saturday, I was giving a talk to a group of seminarians, and one of them fell asleep in front of me. He quite regularly falls asleep. There was one occasion when he was tuning in by Zoom. And after a while, we could hear loud snores. So he switched off his microphone remotely, and a bit later he woke up. And we were then able to switch it back on again. And this is not unlike that. So you can imagine plenty of hot, stuffy, lots of lights, plenty of carbon dioxide going around, loads of people breathing in and out, and poor old Eftikes is, what is he doing? There are many lamps in the upper room where they were gathered together, and in a window sat a certain young man named Eftikes, who was sinking into a deep sleep. He was overcome by sleep, and as Paul continued speaking, you know that awful sound when somebody's talking, maybe it's exactly what you're hearing now, that awful sound of somebody talking when all you can really hear is like a sort of buzzing of flies. Your eyes get heavier and heavier. I know this feeling completely. And as Paul continued speaking, he fell down from the third story and was taken up dead. So, upper room, third story, probably that's the United States third story, which in English would be the second story. So 3 flights of stairs, taking up from the ground to the first and second floor. He's fallen a long way, in other words, and even the fall itself would break his bones, kill him, and so on. It says about him, he's a neanias. A neanias is a youth, somebody rather in the prime of their life. And that's quite a wide description. Usually it would be somebody in their late teens, early 20s, but it could go right up to somebody in their 40s. After that, they were no longer a neanias, they're no longer a young man. They were regarded as being fully mature. Somebody anyway in prime of life. And Eutychus, or Eftychus, as properly pronounced, it means of good fortune. And he was of good fortune, because he was able to sit and listen to St. Paul speak. But of course, he fell asleep during that sermon, as so very many people have fallen asleep since. In fact, it was Abraham Lincoln who said, having been to a sermon, that if everybody who fell asleep during sermons were laid end to end on the pews, of course, everybody is expecting they'd reach from here to the moon and back, he then continued, they'd be far more comfortable. Ah, dear, oh dear. So, Eftychius, he had the choice. He could have been dancing into the night on that Sunday evening. He could have been caroling or drinking or going off and finding naughty people to do naughty things with. But as what he was actually doing was that he is learning from the apostle. And as he's trying to do that, trying desperately to stay awake, nature takes the better of him and he falls asleep. Probably windows in those days, like windows in many parts of the world, they don't have glass in them. If you go to parts of Afghanistan when I was growing up, you had to be pretty well off to have glass in your windows. If you were quite well off, you might have thin slivers of marble in the windows, or alabaster, which are translucent but not transparent, let sunlight in. But most people would have just an open window and then a shutter on the outside to close it at night time or against the heat. And then in the wintertime, we then stuff the other side of the window with straw, or even completely stuff it with straw, and then plaster over the straw for the winter, and then break it open again once spring came. So for about, in Afghanistan, in 2 months, it would be like that. So this is probably nothing unusual to have an open window with nothing in it. There certainly would not have been glass in it. So instead of playing with his game station or with his laptop or something, he has come to listen to the apostle. And he then falls, and St. Luke, who is a doctor, then says that he was taken up dead. Now, if Luke says he was taken up dead, this means he was dead. There are some Protestant theologians, they tend to be ones that are pretty liberal, who want to say, well, he just had the wind knocked out of him, and everybody thought he was dead, but actually he was just recovering. But no, he's actually dead. And the way that St. Luke continues this, we are intended to have something else in our mind as well. And this is what St. Luke says, and this is what happens. And this is what you're meant to have in your mind. But Paul went down, fell on him, and embracing him said, "Do not trouble yourselves, for his life is in him." Okay? And from there we have to rush to 4 Kings, chapter 4. If you have a Protestant Bible, that's 2 Kings, chapter 4, roughly verse 32. But actually it might be worthwhile reading a bit earlier. So you remember that Elisha has been staying with a Shunammite woman, and she has a son. And this is what I'm going to say, start roughly verse 18. So the child grows. Okay, she has a baby through the prayers of St. Elisha, and the child grows, and the child grew. Verse 18. And it came to pass when he went out to his father to the reaping, that he said to his father, my head, my head. His father said to his son, carry him to his mother. So he carried him to his mother, and lay upon her knees until noon, and died. She took him and laid him on the bed of the man of God. She went out and closed the door as she left. She called out to her husband and said, please bring me one of the young men and one of the donkeys. I ride quickly to the man of God and come back. So he said, why go to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath. And she replied, it is well. She saddled the donkey and said to her servant, lead onwards and do not slacken the pace of me unless I tell you. And so it goes on. Then, verse 27, now she came to the man of God on the hill and took him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to push her away. But the man of God said, leave her alone, for her soul is in deep distress. The Lord hid it from me and did not tell me. So she said, did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not tell you not to deceive me? Then Elisha said to Gehazi, "Prepare yourself, take my staff in your hand, and be on your way. If you meet anyone, you will not greet him. If anyone greets you, you will not answer him. I shall lay my staff on the face of the child," which is a sort of, anyway. Then the mother of the child said, "As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I'll not leave you." So Elijah rose and followed her. Now Gehazi went on ahead of them, laid the staff in the child's face, but there was neither voice nor hearing. So he went back to meet him and told him, saying, "The child is not awakened." In other words, the child is dead. Elisha, this is a bit you're meant to remember. Elisha went into the house, and there was a child lying dead on his bed. He went into the room and shut the door against the other two, and prayed to the Lord. Then he went up and lay on the child, put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, hands on his hands. He bowed himself down upon him, and the flesh of the child warmed. He returned and walked backward and forth in the house, went up and bowed himself down upon the child 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Then Elisha called Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite woman." So he called her. She came into where he was and said, "Take your son." So she went in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she took her son and went out. So the bit you're meant to think there is, ooh, Elisha, this incredibly, really important, definitive prophet of the Old Testament, one of the great prophets of the Old Testament. You have Moses and the law, and there's a link actually to Moses here, because Moses, of course, had a staff with which he did miracles. And Elisha takes his staff, i.e. the law of Moses, and places it on the child's face, but nothing happens. So we need more than just the law here. We need something else. And Elisha, the prophet, turns up. So now we have the law and the prophets. Jesus is the law and the prophets, the fulfillment of them. And when you have the law and the prophets, then the child rises, and Elisha bows upon him 7 times, rather like the 7 days of creation. And at the end of that time, the child is resurrected. Remind you of anything? Oh, good. So it should. Okay. So that's 4 Kings, or 2 Kings 4, verses 34 onwards. That's the salient bit. So Paul only does this once. He bows down upon this young man, again a young man, 1 time, and he says, "Do not trouble yourself, for his life is in him." And then I think we should go to verse 12. "And they brought the young man in alive, and they were not a little comforted," where comfort means strengthened. Comfort does not mean they're sitting there feeling nice and cozy. It meant they were strengthened. Come forth with strength. Okay? So, verse 11. "Now when he had come up," St. Paul, "and had broken bread and eaten, and talked a long while, even until daybreak." So we can say, "Oh, we've got a long journey tomorrow. For heaven's sake, Paul, please, can we go to bed?" No, you can't go to bed. There's something more important taking place here. "Even until daybreak, he departed. And they brought the young man in alive." And then they're not a little strengthened. It's about the young man and also about St. Paul's preaching. Okay? Epicus is fine. Everybody is strengthened. That's right. And they have broken bread, finally, and they have received communion, and everybody thereby is now strengthened. There is a wonderful reading from St. John Chrysostom, which, fool as I am, I've left in my office, so I'm just going to go and get that. So this is a good time for you all to scratch your heads and think of some nice questions. It's a good deal warmer in my office than in here, where it's perishingly cold. So this is what St. John Chrysostom says about this passage, and it was really worthwhile reading it. So I decided to print it off rather than quote bits of it. Although there's 17 people or 12 people earlier on, there'll be about 40 people who checked in and checked back out again, said to themselves, oh no, not him again. This is what St. John Chrysostom says. But observe, I pray you, the theatre, how crowded it was, and the miracle, what it was. He, Eutychus, was sitting in a window at dead of night. Such was their eagerness to hear him. Let us take shame to ourselves. Aye, but Paul, say you, was discoursing then. Yes, and Paul discourses now, or rather not Paul, either then or now, but Christ. Yet none cares to hear. No window in the case now, no importunity of hunger or sleep, and yet we do not care to hear. No crowding in a narrow space here, nor any other such comfort. And the wonderful circumstance is that though he was a youth, he was not listless and indifferent, and though he felt himself weighed down by sleep, he did not go away, nor yet fear the danger of falling down. It was not from listlessness that he slumbered, but from necessity of nature. But observe, I beseech you, so fervent was their zeal, that they even assembled in a third loft, for they had not a church yet. St. John Chrysostom, of course, is talking to people in Hagia Sophia, which is a really wonderful place. And so he's saying, you guys, you've got everything here. You lack nothing, and yet you can't be bothered to listen to Christ. Okay? Trouble not yourselves, he says. He said not, he shall come to life again, for I raise him up, but mark the unassuming way in which he comforts them. For his life, says he, is in him. And when he had come up again, and had broken bread and eaten, this thing cut short the discourse. It did no harm, however. When he had eaten, it says, and discoursed a long time, even until break of day, so he departed. Do you mark the frugality of the supper? Do you observe how they passed the whole night? Such were their meals, that the hearers came away sober and fit for hearing. But we, in what do we differ from dogs? Do you mark what a difference between us and those men? They brought the young man alive, and it says, were not a little comforted, both because they received him back alive, and because the miracle had been wrought. And we went before to ship, and sailed to Thassos, there intending to take in Paul, for so he had appointed, minding himself to go afoot. So Paul, having chatted away all the way through the night, and done a miracle and all those other things, sets off by foot. Okay, let's have a look. Miss World. Cat's World says we're students, Simon, etc., etc. Joseph, I'm far too tired to think of any questions. Slept terribly last night. What does it say here? Relevant to the study on passage about falling asleep. Well, Joseph, just listen to my voice droning on in the background. In no time at all, you'll be fast asleep. Simon said, Joseph, we have ups and downs, but you're still here, weighed down by lack of sleep. Yes, poor old Eutychus, you could say he had his up, and then his down, and his up again. We all have our ups and downs, not always when St. Paul is talking. Okay, so there we go. I hope you have a better night's sleep tonight than Joseph. God bless you and keep you. So we need to carry on praying for Hilary, please, and also for Nicholas, whose sister is going off to go and see him in a couple of days from now, and also for Nicoletta who joined us, for Daniel, for Arian's Joseph, and for another Joseph, for Christina, who joins us from time to time on this, and will be teaching, for Thekla's mother, Carol. We also pray for Judy, for Dino's son, Simon, and for Jane, who is also very ill from cancer. So if you could pray for all of those ones, please, I'd be grateful. Giving thanks to God the Father for all of them, in that they are, many of them, recovering, doing quite well, or living very much longer than we expected them to do so. Or like Daniel, he was told this time last year, go home, enjoy Christmas, because presumably, well, they did not expect him to live. Glory to God, and thanks to the good work of some excellent doctors, he is alive even now. Okay? Scott, God bless you. Scott, we'll be praying for you on Saturday. Scott is being baptized along with his family on Saturday, assuming that is the right Scott. I think so. And so pray for him. We also have other people being baptized here. So amongst the others, so we've got Erica and also Tony, both of them being baptized as well. Okay, so keep them in your prayers, please. It's my pleasure, Miss Connie. And Joseph, God bless you and keep you. Lots of our love to you as well. Right, I better go and see if there are people wanting confession, and better go and see what's happening vis-a-vis the library, and check to see whether Eleni would like a cup of tea or coffee, and we'll then carry on from there. So tomorrow, God willing, we will have part 3 of this, where St. Paul sails to Thassos. Okay, righto, God bless you and keep you.